Hi, welcome. This is Shira Goldberg, your host of the Addiction Show. Today we have a really amazing guy. He's very humble, but he has quite a large presence on the social media websites. We all know him with affection as Coach MD. He is out of New York, and he is the founder and director of the New York Center for Longevity and Wellness. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thanks, Shira, for finding me and inviting me.
Well, you know, you have such a great presence on Facebook, and that's how I found you. And a lot of the people that I'm connected to are friends of yours on Facebook, and they're all really into being well and finding your center. And so you being a coach on top of being an MD was just the cherry on my Sunday.
That sounds delicious.
So how did you become a coach? Most people are not medical doctors and see the enormous benefits of coaching. So I'm really glad to see that you're going to be quite an awesome representation.
Mm-hmm. Well, you see, my practice has evolved over many years, and I guess for the first 12 years of my career, it was your typical doctor's kind of practice that everybody's very familiar with, where you go, you sit in the doctor's office for an hour, 2 hours sometimes, you get whisked into the exam room, you're waiting there another 15, 20 minutes, then someone like me pops in and says, okay, what's going on, what's your problem, and before you know it, you're out the door and with a prescription. And that certainly wasn't something that I felt very good about, but it was the reality, and it's unfortunately not really changing much since that was happened to me. In 2002 is when I transitioned my practice to more of a personalized practice, and I was one of the first doctors in the United States to do that, certainly the first in New York State. And when I did that, I had more time with my patients, and we had more time to sit down, and I realized that what I was doing a lot of the time was actually coaching. It was not really treating particular illnesses, but kind of helping people deal with challenges of everyday life. And since I am an MD and I started writing about this kind of stuff, I said, what am I looked, kind of did some self-analysis and asked, what am I doing? What am I? How do I define myself? Well, on one hand, I'm kind of guiding people, I'm coaching them, and on the other hand, I am an MD, I'm a medical doctor, I've done the conventional training, so, let me call myself Coach MD. And it really did fit, because that's what I'm doing, and I realized that what affects people so much and what keeps us well and what gets us sick is kind of one and the same thing. It's our ability to manage the challenges of everyday life. Oftentimes it's money, health, and relationship issues. And I realized that that was the thing that was standing in the way of keeping people really well. And I looked, and I've always been someone who could look outside the box and not just because I was taught a very conventional way. I always had a question. And I would consider myself a holistic doctor in what I think is the truest sense. And what that means is not the fact that I like to talk about vitamins and alternative or integrative therapies. I am interested in those things. But really, when I think of holistic, I think of a blending really of mind, body, and spirit. That's what holistic to me is. We are not just physical beings. We are beings that are affected by so many things that some of those things we don't even understand, and we can't even define within our five senses, or within our human brain alone isn't able to contemplate who we really are, what we really are. And those kind of issues and those kind of challenges, or the ability for us to understand those things, creates such a certain energy and vibration in us that can affect our health in so many different ways, whether for the good or whether for the bad. And so that's kind of how I've evolved into my thinking, and why I call myself Coach MD.
Well, it's really well suited, and it's easy to remember. So that's helpful to find you on Facebook. You
Yeah.
have quite a following. You have over 100,000 likes. So it seems like there's definitely a need for some inspiration and information that you're providing every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's I came up with the Coach MD was one thing I came up with, and the other thing I came up with, this idea of live your everyday extraordinary, and it's not grammatically correct, and I know that, and many of the grammar police on Facebook have called me out on that, and I know that. I do know it, okay, but live your everyday extraordinary is what I see is a true health, a true inner and outer health and beauty. And it's coming into every day with the idea that what can I do today to make my life extraordinary? What can I do to make it great, to make it the best, and be the best I can be? Not necessarily the best at something, but the best that I could be. How can I do that? And so I've created this idea, and all my posts, I just don't pull them out, and the ones I share, they all have something that I see as consistent with the way I view how our brain works and how our mind works and how we can connect with something deeper in us, really our pure potential, our true greatness, and our ability to really live your everyday extraordinary. It's hard for me to sit by when I know that so many people are not there. And so many people, not only are they not there, they're so far from being there. It's always been hard for me to sit back and to just observe that and just care about my own life. I know that is my first obligation, because if I can't keep my own house in order, then I certainly wouldn't be suited to try to help others to do that. But it's very hard to sit back and to watch that when people aren't getting that.
And I see there's definitely a need for just incorporating all of the aspects. And when I talk about vibrations and energy, people just say, "Oh, you're from California. That's all. Everybody is there." But but there's really a true point to it. It does how you see yourself, how you talk to yourself, how you perceive things. I mean, it really does translate into what you're attracting, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we were, I have 4 children, but we were out to dinner with 2 of them the other night, my wife and I, and we were sitting at a restaurant, and a waiter came over. And this guy had such a great energy. And that's what my wife and I said. And even my daughters were kind of, connecting with that also. That he had a great energy. And we talk about this, and people talk about it all the time. That person has a really good energy, really good. I get a good vibe. I get a good feeling about that. And I have to tell you something, that in a doctor-patient relationship, that is enormously powerful in healing, in how you're going to heal, and how you're going to relate to the doctor. If a doctor has an energy that's very negative or very condescending or very arrogant or shuts you out, that's very bad for your internal health. And this is not just some a metaphysical concept. These are concepts that play out every single day in common interaction, and it ultimately affects our health. So as a doctor, I would be remiss to ignore the fact that we have such human communication, and the way we interact and respond to people has such a domino effect, has such an effect that will cause an effect, whether it's positive or negative. And that's very important. So you don't have to be just from California and wear your Birkenstock sandals and don't shave your arms and wear the flowered, or even don't wear any clothes at all. You don't have to be that. You can be in society just like any, and I'm not saying that there's whatever. I'm not judging somebody, but
Right.
You don't have to have that image of you have to be that way in order to connect with this kind of thought, because it does have an effect on how you live your life and how you view your life, and how you attract, as you said.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, this is the addiction show, so I want you to talk a little bit about how, when people are interested in being in recovery and working through the core issues that brought them into their addictive behaviors, how this can translate into not only living a life sober, but really living a life that encapsulates health and well-being, and just that sense of serenity within. And I think you would be really great to talk about that. I mean, the connection.
Yeah. Well, you have the addiction show, and many people listening will think, oh, addiction, oh, I don't have addiction because I don't have a substance abuse addiction. Well, their addiction is really a safety blanket. It's a comfort zone. It's the expected. It's the familiar. It's what we view as normal in our life. It's anything that we have made a habit in our life. And what are habits? Well, I think in order to understand what habits are, it's important to kind of give you a little bit of view into Charles Glassman, Coach MD's view of the world and humanity, okay?
I'm ready.
Okay. I view this as that all humans are a duality, a dualistic nature. And that dualistic nature is one of a primitive nature and one of a divine nature. And our primitive nature, which is over 250,000 years old, is controlled by a very base primitive part of our brain, which I have called the automatic brain, or the A for automatic, the B for brain, the AB. And this AB has been around for over 250,000 years and served only one purpose, and that's to protect us from danger, threat, or vulnerability with only two reactions. Those reactions are fight or flight. Those are the only two reactions. And in prehistoric times, those reactions served very well for humankind to protect them from danger, threat, or vulnerability of their environment, what their five senses posed for them. But something happened around the time of biblical creation. And whether you're a religious person or a secular person, believe in Scripture or don't believe in Scripture, it really doesn't matter. Something happened around the time of most Bible stories, most biblical creation stories, where humankind transitioned from a hunter and gatherer society to a more agrarian society. And around that time is when I believe something happened where humankind developed a mind, whether you believe it was gifted from God or whatever, but humankind developed a mind. And this mind was an ability to understand concepts that are beyond our five senses, concepts that we couldn't readily see, feel, touch, smell, hear. These are our concepts that are things as though what happens when we die, or think about the past, or think about the future. So what has happened was with that mind we developed, but not only were we developing this higher mind, but at the same time, our primitive brain, our automatic brain, our AB, was also growing to develop a frontal cortex. And this frontal cortex was our ability to, yes, think about the future, but how is that future going to impact our safety? And so we have our primitive brain, which ultimately controls the majority of our behaviors. But we also have this divine nature, which is our pure potential, what we really are, our true capabilities. Every human being has this. Every single human being has both of this. And so what does this have to do with addiction? Well, take this primitive brain now into the 21st century. And this 21st century, this brain stores data, and that's all it does. It stores data to know what is going to protect us, what is going to be able to keep us safe. And one of the things that we all have as human beings, we have some universal danger folders, which this brain stores to know if these things happen, we are going to be in danger, we're going to be threatened, or we're going to be vulnerable. And one of the biggest dangers is the unknown, the unfamiliar. The unknown for every human being is a potential danger, and this brain knows it. And this brain will stay in the way of us connecting with our divine nature because it's so powerful, it's so seductive, and it's so influential on us. And so what happens is we store what's known and what's unknown. And let's say we were growing up in a family that was, our father was an alcoholic or our mother was a substance abuser. That's what we grew up with. That's what was known to us. Our brain is storing that data. So when we become older, the opposite of that is going to be unknown to us. And so remember what I said about this primitive brain. We fight and flee danger. If the unknown is danger, we're going to fight or flee it. Well, if the unknown is a sober household, if the unknown is an unaddicted household, if the unknown is a household which is peaceful, where a mother and a father have open communication and are able to disagree with each other without being aggressive, without yelling or screaming or hitting or beating. Well, if that's what was known to us, well, the unknown is the opposite, and we're going to fight or flee that. So we're going to fight or flee to get what we know, the addiction. We're going to fight or flee the yelling, the peacefulness. So that is one of the things that keeps people addicted. It's not only their history, but once they become addicted, it becomes familiar to them. So them not being addicted is scary. For instance, if you have an alcoholic family, let's say, and somebody becomes sober all of a sudden, goes to AA and becomes sober, that often ends up in a broken home, in a divorced home, because the person who was in that relationship with that addicted person, it was so comfortable for them and so predictable for them, even if it was a self-sabotaging and hurtful, it was still known. And now you have the unknown of a sober partner. And what scariness is that? Because your pure potential now has the opportunity to come up. So one of the greatest saboteurs in addiction, whether it's a substance abuse addiction, whether it's a food addiction, whether it's any type of addiction, you must look at it as a habit. And habits are comfortable.
I'm glad you're bringing up this point, because there's so much stigma that surrounds addiction, and for those that aren't studying it or experts in it, they just can't understand, why would you continue to hurt yourself at all costs, or why would you do this to the family? They see it as it's irrational. But for someone who's in addiction, it's the most rational response to their environment or to their situation, because they might not have the tools, or they have been socially conditioned. So there's that disconnect between trying to explain your personal accountability versus what the assumptions are, or the expectations of that person that would really like to be helped, but it's that fear. So they run back to what they know is the familiar, which is usually harmful.
Yes, absolutely. And we fight or flee danger. And the addiction part initially starts as a flight from whatever dangers or vulnerabilities or threats are in your everyday life, but it also has a deep core as danger memories, as I call them, from childhood. And it's very interesting, because I understand this fully. I completely understand it. I never smoked before, but I started a lot of my thinking about smokers years ago, and smokers would come up to me and say, how do you know this stuff? And it's like my children would say to me, Dad, you're not edgy enough, okay? How are you going to sell books? How is anybody going to buy your stuff? You really need something like, you need to be in rehab or something. You need to have been in jail or something to just so people will be sexy, and they'll say, wow, this guy, but something, I know it, and I know the head of an addicted person, because I feel that I've discovered something about human nature in a way with the understanding our primitive nature versus our divine nature, and the idea how we evolved as human beings. And I understand it so clearly that I understand why someone is addicted. And I understand it, but I also know that it's possible to make the abnormal normal. And so what I mean by that, the normal for the addicted person is being addicted. The normal for the sexually addicted person is being sexually addicted. The normal for the obese person who's food addicted is to be obese. The normal for the bully or the bully CEO, okay, who's richer than you could imagine, okay, the normal for him is to bully people, is to be aggressive, is to make his as much money as possible because he's addicted to that. Okay, that's his normal. Okay, so you may think that person has it all. Okay, but that person's addicted just like somebody who's addicted to meth or alcohol. Okay, it's an addiction, it's a habit, and some may be more socially accepted, but it's the same primitive nature. It's our primitive nature. And in order to change it, we have to make the abnormal normal. By making the abnormal normal is by developing new habits, new comfort zones, new addictions in a sense, being addicted to something that's good for us. And that's how you trick your primitive brain into not fighting and fleeing it anymore, because it's become normal. And I know because I had many insecurities, tons of insecurities. And the new book I'm writing, I'm going to lay it all out there. I've laid it all out to some extent in my first book, Brain Drain, my Pulsive Life System. But in my new book, I'm really showing it because I really want people to realize that there is hope for everyone. Okay, not that like I said, not that I wasn't in rehab. Okay, I wasn't like that. I wasn't, addicted to heroin or whatever, or I didn't commit any crimes where I was in jail and I, rehabilitated myself. No, but that understanding, I know how to transition, and in order to do it, it's about understanding that every human being has certain gifts, strengths, talents, skill sets, and it's about using those and identifying those, and then every day making it a practice to work in alignment with those gifts. And once you do that and take the action to do it, and it has to be action, can't just be talking about it, can't just be philosophizing about it, can't just saying, oh, I read Dr. Glassman's book and it sounds great to me, okay? Because it's like the person who came up to me, this woman in the hospital a few years ago, and she said, and she walked up to me and said, Dr. Glassman, I hear you're really into holistic medicine. And I said, yeah, I am open-minded. And this woman, unfortunately, was probably about 300 pounds overweight, very unfit. And she said, wow, it's glad to hear that you're into those things because I am too. And it made me very sad that she did not have this insight, that she was able to talk about these great things, talk about the alternative medicine, talk about integrative medicine or whatever, or spiritual, metaphysical things, but she wasn't able to take the action in her own life. And so I see that with people who are addicted, all it's going to take is to take that addiction and to create a new addiction, to create a new habit, to create a new known, to make the abnormal normal. So your primitive brain won't fight and flee it anymore. So when it does fight and flee, it'll fight and flee the self-sabotaging behaviors. So then you can release that primitive nature and reveal the divine nature, which is your true self, which everyone's capable of doing.
Yeah, that's a really good point that you brought up. With our primitive reptilian brain, that's what a lot of people know it as. It was very necessary in the times where we were fleeing and we were in life and death situations. But what's happened is we are no longer in such scary situations. But the way we process our stress is through the same way. So we are inundating ourselves with this enormous amount of stress and this enormous amount of pressure, and we don't know how to express it or to release it. So it's not going anywhere. And then eventually, I think what happens with a lot of people with substance use disorders, they are just taking it on, and then their release is to use the drugs just to escape all of the pain. And
Yeah.
as a physician, you're well aware of the holistic aspects of it. And I really, unfortunately, see a lot of clinicians across the board. They have very limited understanding of how to show compassion and empathy, because they're like, even if they identified addiction as a disease, or some, through the pathological medical model, they're still saying, well, just stop smoking. And that usually doesn't help, because most people are pretty smart, I found, and they know they're overweight, or they know they shouldn't be smoking meth, or they know they
Yeah.
shouldn't be drinking to the point of blackout. So what can we do about the disconnect?
Well, that's a really good point. And that's kind of what I've made my life mission to do, because I do feel as though it's really hard in a 7-minute doctor's visit to address issues that are complicated and are controlling someone's life. And we are, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're complicated beings. We are mind, body, and spirit. We're not just our physical body. And you mentioned the reptilian brain, and that certainly is a big part of our primitive brain. But our primitive brain has grown to involve the frontal cortex, which involves thoughts. And we can't minimize the power of our thoughts and how that creates our whole reality. And it creates, for most people, a very negative reality, because it generates thoughts and emotions that try to protect us. And most of those things, the way it tries to protect us, is by creating thoughts to keep us in our comfort safe zone, which for addicted people is being addicted. So the disconnect, unfortunately, it's going to take doctors to look into themselves, and it's going to take doctors to understand their dynamic. And in fact, I mentioned I'm writing a new book. In that new book, I'm going to have several chapters dedicated to how doctors think, and how, and in that, it's going to be taken not so well by my colleagues initially, but when you really look into it, it will be very therapeutic, because it will help understand and help connect with patients secondarily and with themselves first, because that's what it's about. My life mission and my purpose that I feel now is not to put myself up on a pedestal, but to get people to put themselves up on their own individual pedestal, so they can know how to keep their own house in order, know how they can do the best that they can be, do the best they can, and be the best they can be. And certainly the best they can be is not destroying their physical body, not destroying and blocking their mind. Their mind is always there. This is my distinction I make. Their mind and divine nature is always there. The way they destroy it is by believing, trusting, and taking direction in this primitive instincts. And doctors will do the same, because we all have this. Doctors will be very protective. And they feel very insecure because they don't want to be blamed if somebody who's addicted, something happens to them. They want to remove themselves from that responsibility. And the way they do that is by creating that wall, creating that barrier. So, hey, it's not my fault. Oh, it's not my fault. You did this to yourself. Just fix it. Don't look to me to fix it, because this is your problem. And don't blame me if you can't fix it. But really, in order to understand what's going on, it's going to be some introspection that needs to be done on each individual doctor. And each individual person needs to do that as well.
Well, I'm really glad you're the voice of reason in the medical community.
Yeah.
But I really think there's so much opportunity to incorporate the compassionate side of medicine. I mean, as a healer, and you're a professional, you do this every day, and so do thousands of doctors in New York. But somehow there's that distinction between behavioral health or mental health and physical health. So it's almost like never the two shall meet. So there's a lot that can be learned from these conversations with doctors. And I've been watching some videos on YouTube, and they're actually starting to do training in medical schools, motivational interviewing techniques. So I see there's some progress, but as with everything, it's wonderful to see, but lots of room remains for additional information and really compassion. I think people would be more open to feel comfortable if they really felt like they were able to talk with someone who understood what they were going through in some capacity.
Yeah. No, it really takes somebody that you really feel cares, that you really feel cares and understands what the challenge is, and that's so many people in this world aren't living life. They're running from life, and they're reacting to life instead of being able to reflect and respond appropriately. And all of that has to do with our primitive ways and our primitive instincts. We're not that far removed, only a couple hundred generations from our cave-dwelling ancestors. I mean, we're not that far removed. And so, I mean, we have that as part of our nature. And we really have to understand that it shows up in all different ways that we think is human, and it is human, but it's primitive. And it shows up on a global scale. We just look around the world, clearly a global scale, but it all it comes down to an individual. And each individual has to be responsible for themselves, but sometimes it takes another person just to know that someone cares about them, to allow them to be able to let themselves be vulnerable and let themselves put their guard down so they can trust that going and leaving shore is actually safer than staying on shore. And sometimes leaving the shore is leaving those ways that you were so used to, so familiar. And, like someone who's an alcoholic, they could be, here's an interesting thing, Chatham Tatum, big macho Chatham Tanning, what's his name? The guy, the actor, Chatham Tanning, whatever.
I really don't. I know what you're talking about, but I'm not.
Abs, the guy who's in Jump Street 22, whatever, 22 Jump Street.
Yeah.
The heartthrob, the perfect guy in a perfect marriage with a baby in Hawaii. Everything's beautiful. Okay, comes out and says he's what did he say? I'm a functional alcoholic or something. I don't know, something like that. Okay. Well, there you have it. I mean, here's a guy who you think has it all, okay? And not only he has the physical attraction, he has the relationship now, the perfect. He has the money, being an actor. So you think this guy has it all, but what people don't understand is that we all have this primitive nature. Whether it's him, whether it's me, whether it's you, whether it's somebody from afar that you admire, that you think has it all, and you wish you could be like them. That's that's something that is very telling, because that's somebody who is going to face some trouble because he hasn't understood what his primitive nature is doing, and it's become a habit for him. It's become familiar for him to use alcohol to allow him to interact with people and to have fun. And the opposite of that now, to actually go into a party sober and to interact with his wife sober, or now his child sober, is a scary thought because he doesn't know what that's like. And so he's fighting and fleeing that. And it's very important to understand that leaving shore is actually safer than staying in that comfort zone.
Well, it sounds like he needs to give you a call.
Yeah, right. yeah. That might get me a few. Yeah. That might get me a few more likes on Coach MD's.
Well, you mentioned your book Brain Drain. That's available, and your newest book will be made available soon. When will that be out?
yeah, I'm working very, very hopefully efficiently on that. It should be completed probably by September. By the end of September now, I'm thinking. I have a lot of have to arrange it. It's being edited as I go along, so that won't stall things. And it's what I thought to do first was to release it digitally without printing it. My book Brain Drain I printed, but it's been more successful on Kindle, on digital platform. So I've decided that that's how I'm going to release it first, and I will have a pre-release where I'll probably release it for a lot. I mean, not that it's a lot digitally. It's going to probably be less than $10, a little less than $10, but because that's how digital books are priced. But I may pre-release it, much even less expensive than that. That's not going to mean that the value is not there, because I really sincerely feel that this book is going to be something that is going to help so many people understand just why they behave the way they behave. And that goes through people who you may think have their stuff together, or people who are just down and out and on Skid Row. I really believe this will shed the light on so many things, and it's also I'm addressing many taboo topics that people say don't bring up in a cocktail party, like religion. I'm dedicating several chapters on religion and how my ideas of the primitive nature and divine nature, how that reflects and how that's been developed by some traditional religions. I'm going to be talking about politics, and so that's going to also be pretty controversial. But just when you start understanding the dynamic of how our brain works and how it stands in the way from our true potential, it shows how it stands in the way from our true human potential as a world, as a people, as inhabitants of this earth, and how we're all connected. And so this has gone from from a place of just advancing one's health to what I feel is a much more significant message and much more significant understanding of human nature. And it will be, have references. It'll have, an index and a table of contents, and it's going to be, a significant book. I feel, and something that I know is going to help a lot of individuals, and hopefully it will help a lot of people, and maybe even with some grandiose ideas, help the world so we can live on this earth in peace and connection.
Well, let us know when it's available, and I'm sure there will be a lot of interest in it, because there's a lot of people that are just looking for ways that they can help themselves, and this sounds like a really great resource for them to be able to do that. So in order to save the world, we have to save our own house first. I mean, that's we have to keep our own home in order before we can try to get other people's homes in order. Well, Dr. Glassman, also known as Coach MD, thank you so much for taking time out of your hectic schedule and being with us on the Addiction Show. This show will be available along with all of your links. You have some great videos and some interviews, and just to get more information, you can check them out, and we'll look forward to that book.
Great. Thanks so much, Shira.